Okay, we're recording. So, welcome everybody to Zoom Tuesday at the Capitol. The Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance and its citizen advocates join together every Tuesday at 10 a.m. over Zoom as we go through the pandemic before we can head back to the Capitol. And we talk about what's happening at the state Capitol. What are the issues that are affecting people with brain injury or other disabilities, and what we can do to have a positive impact on that. Today is Tuesday, March 23rd, and it's week 12 of the legislative process. So as long as I started giving the week numbers, I'm just going to keep rolling with that
Good.
model. So if those of you keeping track, this is our 12th week
Mhm.
moving forward at the Capitol. In terms of what's going on at the Capitol, this week is the end. We've passed the two policy committee deadlines, so things are a little less frantic than they have been over the last 2 weeks. The first policy deadline was a week ago, Friday, March 12th, and the second policy committee deadline was last Friday, March 19th. And essentially, what that means is that in order for policy bills to remain alive, they have to meet both the first and second policy deadlines. And it doesn't matter if they met it in the House or the Senate first, but they have to meet the deadlines in both bodies. So I want to give you guys kind of a quick update on what on some of our bills, what did and what didn't meet the deadlines. We touched on this last week, but I want to sort of finalize it. Um, and so we have a period now where the next deadline is coming up on April 9th. I'm going to touch on that in a little more detail in a few minutes, but that's the finance deadline, the finance committee deadline. So the first two deadlines relate to policies. The third deadline relates to finance. Um, and so, yeah, so we've had a pretty wild ride for the last couple of weeks trying to get bills heard, taking bills that did get heard and making sure that they passed. And I'm pleased to report that Cassie's Law did meet both first and second deadline. So we were able to get it through. Yeah, I'm really excited about that, guys. We were able to get it through the Senate 2 weeks ago to meet the first deadline. And then we came back over to the House because we had to stop in two policy committees. We got one policy committee right away. And we got the second policy committee met last Thursday night. So we actually met the second deadline a day ahead of time. I was pretty late at night. We
Yay.
started about 8:30 in the morning to, and we didn't, and they took a break during the day because they had to go act like 2-year-olds on the House floor before they came back. But they did come back and they got to us and wrapped up the committee about 8:30 that night. So Tim Berry took the day off, spent all day. And we finally got on about 8:30. I don't know if any of you guys had a chance to see the testimony, Tim's testimony. It's very moving. I did put a link in his Senate testimony in the email last week. I can send that off again today.
Yeah, would
So
you?
yeah, I sure would. Take a look at it, guys. It's very moving. He's testified 3 times now. And I'll send one link. I mean, you can watch 3 different versions of his story if you'd like. But you'll get the flavor for it. And it was very powerful, and it passed. So we're really pleased about that. I know we had a very disappointing deadline with the Joyce bill to do bus driver traffic, bus driver training for helping people with disabilities get off metro buses, transit buses. It did not meet the policy committee deadline, but we're not giving up. We're going to keep pushing for a legislative solution to this. And even though we might not see, in all likelihood, a legislative progress on that this year, Joy is going to continue to push for policy changes within the system itself. And I know Patsy's agreed to help her with that. So I think, I really do think ultimately we need a legislative solution to this issue. We need it to be mandatory. But in the meantime, I think we can grease the wheels a little bit and keep working on that stuff. So there was also a number of other bills that moved forward in different levels of success with other disability issues. I won't spend time today touching on all those. You guys will probably don't want to hear a whole list of those, but I will put some of the highlights in the update over the next couple of weeks. So, so that's really good news on Cassie's Law, and it basically means we're still alive. Now we haven't passed anything yet, you guys. What we've done is we've gotten the bills on the pile that are under consideration for funding. That's essentially, all this hard work has gotten us. Now, it's much better to be in the pile that's open for consideration than to not be in the pile that's open for consideration. But just because you're in that pile doesn't mean you're going to make it. So that's what the third deadline is all about, and that's what we're pushing for right now, is trying to figure out a way to make sure that it's funded. And without getting too far into the weeds, essentially, they support the concept and the idea of conducting these neuropsychological examinations prior to sentencing for people convicted of a felony that have brain injury, stroke, or fetal alcohol syndrome. I think everybody agrees that's a good idea. What we gotta figure out is how to pay for them. And either the state has to pay for them and take it out of the budget, or we have to tell the counties to pay for them. And nobody at the state really wants to tell the counties to go pay for it. We don't want to put an unfunded mandate on the counties. So we're trying to figure out how we can make sure that this gets in the budget. And so that relates to my final point today, which is on the update, which is the state budget. And so I've already mentioned a couple times the third deadline. So just so that you understand, we got 3 weeks. We got this week, next week, and the following week, and then the end of that week is April 9th. That's the third deadline. And what that means is all finance bills have to come out of the finance committees. The finance committees in the Senate, and the Ways and Means Committee in the House are the final stops for budget bills by that day. And so it's a little strange in that we got this week to work on those bills. Next week is spring break. There is no legislature meeting next week. We'll still meet here on Tuesdays. I don't know if it matters to you guys. I mean, if you want to take a week off, go ahead, but I'll be here and give you guys an update. We wouldn't be going to the Capitol if the Capitol was in session, because it'd be pretty dead. But Zoom is Zoom, so we'll be here. Unless you want the day off, you can certainly have the day off. And then they'll come back. And so my guess is, just like any good procrastinator, I don't think they'll get an awful lot of work done this week. And then next week is a break, and then the final week will be really crazy. So, but what we are seeing right now is really what I call positioning, messaging. Positioning. We're seeing sort of fights between the Republicans and the Democrats about what Minnesota should be about, what Minnesota should do. You have Democrats who control the House in Minnesota, and Republicans who control the Senate. We're the only state in the country that has a mixed legislative body. All other states are either all Democrats or all Republicans. We have a mixed one. Now, there are states that have a governor from a different party than the legislature, and Minnesota's governor is Democrat, so it's kind of like 2-1. But the Republicans are saying, what their vision is for what Minnesota should do. The Democrats are saying what their vision is of what Minnesota should do. And guess what, guys? They're not the same thing. You got different ideas about what to do with the surplus. Whether we should give it back to the taxpayers, whether we should give it back to businesses, or whether we should use it to do something about the inequities and the injustice that the COVID pandemic has had on people. So we're working on that. And then there's a whole lot of other stuff I could talk about in terms of, about the budget forecast. You guys remember from a couple of weeks, there is a surplus. That's helpful. And without getting too deep, I want to be clear, that surplus, a lot of that surplus is one-time money. And what that means is that it's not ongoing funding, right? It's a surplus that's going to be short term. And so you can't necessarily use that for long-term ongoing funds, because a lot of that surplus, not all of it, because we don't know exactly yet, but a lot of that surplus is contingent on federal dollars coming to Minnesota as part of the previous CARES Act that was passed last year, and the new, I forget what the name, there's some fancy name for the new federal stimulus bill. I don't know if you guys got your $1,400 yet or not, but there's some new name for that bill. And there is money coming to the state of Minnesota from the federal government. We don't know exactly how much. We don't know what the strings are that are attached to it, but we do know that it is one-time money. So while it's great news that there'll be some funding to come help Minnesota with its budget, you can't build long-term programs on one-time money, because that money goes away. It's sort of like if you get a bonus and you decide to move into a mansion, once that bonus goes away, you still got to pay that rent. So that's where that's at. And so we did see last week, and I'll wrap up with this. We did see last week the Senate come out with their targets, is what they're technically called, their budget proposal. And the things that they are promoting to be done with the surplus. And this week, I'm sorry, I thought I had it handy here. And this week, in fact, today at 10 o'clock, right now as we speak, the Democrats are having in the House are having a press conference on what they want to do with the budget. So I'll put a quick link to that, or at least some notes from that in my update that comes out this afternoon. And so, so that's what I mean by positioning. The Republicans have come out and said what they want to do. Last week, the Democrats are coming out today, right now, talking about what they want to do. And then we'll see how long they decide to fight and so on and so forth to go forward. It probably, won't manifest itself a lot in the next couple of weeks because the House will do what the House wants to do. There'll be a lot of Republicans who are the minority in the House throwing sand in the gears, trying to stop the Democrats from what they're trying to do. But in a sense, the Democrats have the votes they need to pass what they want to pass in the House. The opposite is true in the Senate. The Republicans are in charge in the Senate. The Democrats will be spending this week throwing sand in their gears, but ultimately the Republicans have the votes that they need to pass what the Republicans want to do. So you'll see two bills come out of the process in the next few weeks, very different. But those bills will be created, and those bills will have to be rectified in conference committee and in negotiations with the governor. That's the thing that could take till July or however long. Who knows? And I won't make any predictions on that right now. But and we'll talk about that another time. But in the meantime, the House will work on their budget from the Democrats' priorities, sense of priorities. The Senate will work on their budget from the Republicans' side of priorities. We'll have those fights go forward on the floor with the minority party trying to object and add amendments and throw sand in the gears. And then ultimately, then we'll have to sit down and negotiate a compromise. So thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you for all your hard work. The next step as we push this forward really is to let our legislators know what we want them to fund. And so I will be working on a draft action alert for you guys if you're interested to write your own senator, your own rep, possibly the committees on Cassie's law, the fact that you support it. What you can do in the meantime is make sure your intros are typed up and ready to go, because I'll send you sample language, but if we all send the exact same message, if you all send the exact same message, then they'll figure out that it was, that one guy wrote it, probably me, and that you guys just push send. Whereas if you guys can add a paragraph about yourself at the beginning, and the ask is similar, then it's much more powerful, because then they know it's coming directly from you. So please get your intros drafted on your computer, ready to roll. And between all her schoolwork, Brooklyn is committed to helping you guys do that, and I will too. So get those intros ready to go. I'll send some sample language out in an action alert this week. Maybe next week, maybe this week. We're not sure exactly yet. We got to wait and see what the Democrats do today and where the committee chairs are. But that ask, then I will give you sample language and what you can put for the ask. But essentially to ensure that they fund the neuropsychological evaluations that are being proposed under Cassie's law. That's the thing we're fighting for money right now on. In the meantime, the last thing I'll say, I know I've already said that, but this truly is the last thing I'll say, is that we have to watch the budgets for any cuts to Medicaid. We're not sure, what's going to happen there, what they plan to do. We want to make sure that spend down change that we pushed for 2 years ago, that's supposed to happen a year from this July. So another, 14, 15 months, and we'll see that actually happen. We need to protect that, make sure that happens. The governor's new budget came out, and he took his recommendation to cut the spinal cord traumatic brain injury fund out of his proposals. So it's money that was already there that he recommended cutting, that he no longer is recommending cutting. So we have to watch that and just make sure it stays there. It is there already, so we don't have to put it there. We just have to protect it. So things like that. There's a governor budget wants to do some stuff with the DWI reinstatement fee that I won't go into it. But really watching that budget for potential cuts is going to be the main thing over the next few weeks, in addition to pushing Cassie's law. So that's the political update. Lots happening. I went on a little longer than I thought, which is totally out of character. Sorry, guys. But I really appreciate all of your efforts and all of your help. So thank you very much for tuning in. I'm going to turn off the recording.
And I'm going to jump